You unlock this door. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You've just crossed over into
common sense zone.
They've only become as intrusive and oppressive as we've allowed them to gain that kind of strength. And now it's about leading the reform movement back. As I say many times, I think my job more than anything is to vote no and to work towards repealing laws that oppress our freedoms and restrict trade and restrict our ability to meet our fullest potential in business and in education. And when we go to healthcare and education, I see the federal government at this point, because of where we become, having maybe a role in the common good of providing bricks and mortar support. That means the buildings and the infrastructure that is oftentimes the most costly to local communities. But let the local communities run these schools and healthcare centers the way that best suits their local community.
And this is coming from a teacher. I want to say that again. This is coming from a teacher.
Yes, and no strings attached. Now that is a good investment. And I think when you read some of the writings of Jefferson, I agree with him that he says, yeah, he struggled with that we do have sort of it is in the common good to have sort of a common sense of nationality, a common sense of certainly understanding our Constitution, and a national pride. Now that's, of course, that's used as a pejorative negative, and we're called nativists. Because we're just not willing to accept that the rest of the world is one big happy place, and we're going to be, and we're saying, well, I don't know if it's that happy or not. So we like things the way they are here, and I want to preserve that, and that's what we need to do, which is get out of the UN and stop allowing international meddling in our affairs, give people back their money, and allow them to invest in health care. And if they need it, and target it, and almost make that a business where, you, because of your lifestyle, as we've seen now, yes, some of that is important for insurance companies, and we feel that's a bit intrusive because of government regulation. But whatever works for everyone together in the common good is something that's going to help. But that common good starts in your local community, and then at your state level, and then the states, which should take a look at telling the federal government just exactly what they'd like, rather than about what they don't like, rather than what they want help with. Get out of our lives.
People can't understand, because we have this huge education department, and they take the money from the people and take it to the big pot of money up in D.C., and then they dole it out to the states. And what I feel needs to be done is more, don't take that money from us, let our local governments take that money, and if your schools aren't teaching the way that you want to teach it, you vote the school board out, and you get people in that believe what the local community believes. I mean, and that is where the answer is. I mean, local management of your own government problems is the best way to do it, not somebody that's way in D.C. that doesn't have a clue about what's going on. And that brings me, the school brought me to family issues, I guess. Abortion's going to be a big one. Where do you stand on the abortion issue?
I'm proudly and forever pro-life. And as a U.S. Senator, here's where people need to get their minds wrapped around these situations, that, my influence would only be in choosing Supreme Court justices who would, stick to the sanctity of life, as it says in the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution, that sanctity of life, all life, is to be protected, and we need to honor that to God. So as well to God, as well as to our Constitution, our founding fathers, who we are. But if any piece of legislation ever came across my desk that dealt with that issue, it's just not under the job description of a U.S. Senator, and my obligation is to vote no on anything that gets the federal government involved in our lives, in our homes, and certainly would vote no on anything that has a tax dollar attached to it.
See, and that is, again, something I've talked about. Abortion, if states deal with abortion now, I mean, it depends on how it's determined whether or not Roe v. Wade stands or not, but I believe individual states should be able to take on that issue, along with gay marriage or civil unions, and those issues, I think, are better handled at a state level than they are at the federal government level. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. That's where the power lies, and that's how we regain the balance of power in this country. However, I think that I feel that abortion is murder, and certainly it's repugnant to me, although the folks who make that choice will have their day of reckoning, and that's where personal responsibility comes in. My job as a senator would, again, it would be up to my constituents. And if I had an overwhelming majority of my constituents who told me to vote in favor of abortion, then I would reach the point where, as a public servant, I could no longer serve my constituents, and I would step down and allow someone else to make that decision.
Yeah, very good. What about, recently in the media, there's been the story about a voucher program in D.C. that basically was costing half of what it cost for the public school to teach the children, and the children were apparently doing a little bit better, and the schools were much safer, and the parents were more involved with the school, and they just voted to cut that program. Would you be in favor of school vouchers for localities that wish to have school vouchers?
Let's take a look at, again, school vouchers being a taxpayer-funded program. I'm against anything that's taxpayer-funded. However, if you have corporations and you have industry and you have private sector and you have individuals who want to support their local schools, let's use this analogy. It's just like when a school can't afford a sports program and the parents band together and have a booster club, right? To support that extracurricular activity. Again, the concept of education is clearly academic. And that's where what we need to get back to. Certainly a holistic approach, but too much of the classroom time and too many taxpayer dollars is spent on administrators who make policy and who dictate what's going on in the classrooms, which is useless. and then our children end up barely, being able to read and write, and still getting into college, by the way.
Yep, I know
a whole
that.
other problem. So, let's back up and say, yes, you darn right, let's get the government out of our schools, and number one, we need to bust up the unions, because the National Education Association is nothing but a branch of the socialist government that you now see bulldogging its way through its first 100 days. And let me tell you what, they'll be there to hold their arms around them and protect them every step of the way, because they want those children's minds, and they cannot afford, especially in Washington, D.C., for the parents to know what's best for their children.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.